welcome to a special edition of Cover to Cover Book Beat. I'm your host, Roger Nichols. Normally, we interview authors on this program, but we're also interested in people with useful and intriguing ideas. And that's the case today, when our guest is South Carolina State Senator John L. Scott, Jr. He's here to talk about a new program, the South Carolina Institutes of Innovation and Information, or SCIII. Its purpose is to help grow student enrollment at historic black colleges and universities, and to foster a classroom-to-job environment with the students, schools, and business community. Now, you may be asking yourself why he's talking to an old white guy from rural Oregon when the nearest historic black college or university is in Oklahoma. That's because good ideas know no boundary, and there are lessons for all of us in their program. Very pleased to welcome State Senator John L. Scott, Jr.
Roger, my pleasure to be with you today.
Let's start with a background. What was the impetus and how did this program come about?
Well, first, I'm a graduate of an HBCU, South Carolina State University. Probably about 10 years ago, I was invited to a luncheon, and the conversation at the luncheon was, has HBCU played out its useful lifetime? And if so, what would we do with kids who would not be accepted at larger institutions? And looking at that background, we still have so many kids for the first time, first generation going to college. And to leave these small communities and go to large universities. In most cases, the environment itself, making that large adjustment, coming from small high schools to major universities, it's just sometimes it's just too big a leap for some of the kids. Now, some do quite well because they've had some exposure during the summer months. Parents, in many cases, either work for large corporations or own some corporations, so they've had a chance to go in these corporations and get a feel for what the job market may be like, and also provide them some incentives when they go back to school to even work even harder. Always that cultural adjustment. In many cases, these kids either make it or they don't. Set my mind to thinking, what can we do to get more kids to go to college? There's a big push for a long time for technical schools. And then we moved to having articulation agreements where kids go spend 2 years in tech school and go to 4 years. But we know that after 2 years, once a youngster get any kind of degree, certificate, lots of times they won't go further. They'll put it on the back burner and say, okay, we'll do it later, and they don't. And so I looked at a concept. What if we could create an environment where kids could go to college, also get an experience of doing both research, being involved in technology, also having an experience of working with corporates, also have an experience even with corporates coming on the campus, having conversations with them. There's a larger exchange other than just time when it's time to recruit somebody who wants a job. Just 4 or 5 years between that time, it's just this child or student ready to move on to the next level. So I took a look at every HBCU. We have 7 HBCUs in the state. What are those things that those HBCUs offer on a day-to-day basis in terms of classroom structure? What are some of the environmental issues that's in that community that needs to be addressed? And since most of these kids come out of these communities, they'll know firsthand and save us a lot of time and money, especially doing research. How can I get these kids to want to stay in their communities as we continue to grow the job market? What's going on with a plan we did in the state some 30 years ago when we moved from having manufacturers to begin to recruit large corporations coming in? A lot of different factors. Why a number of the rural counties were not growing, why corporates were not moving in. Why was always mention of a shortage in terms of professionals to be able to work on these jobs, as well as technical skills. And so I put all that together and began to do my research. And what I discovered, if I looked at each HBCU and I looked at those things that they offer, an example, I went to South Carolina State College, graduate in 1975 out of the business department with a degree in accounting and a minor in economics. So I knew state had a great business department. So what if I could create an institute of business, a lot of environmental issues in that area, especially with water quality, air quality. So if I could throw the environmental part and add the science provision to it. Communication, as you know, across the country, we're looking at broadband. How can I get the school involved? When it's right in the middle where the rural counties are, the broadband's going to go in, and the students will have know more about what's going on, especially who that partner will be. And that's going to be cooperatives in those rural counties. And those are the ones who, in many cases, will be first line. And then transportation, the transportation center was already in place. Easy name, Beck, BECT. And
Wow.
so, yeah, and so the idea now is to get a someone from out of that community at that college, or bring in a director, and create a direction this institute could go. Who would be our corporate partners in those areas? Each one of those areas I just talked about. As you're aware, we're talking about by 2035, most of the vehicles being electrical cars. And so there's a lot of work to be done with, especially with cooperatives. How can the students get involved? How can they learn more about what's going on? And a lot of the Santee Cooper, who the corporates buy power from, they do water too, and sell water to cities and counties in those areas. So how can I get these young people involved? Let them learn a lot more about what's going on. We already provide each HBCU in the state some funding called HEAP funding, High Education Enhancement Program money. It's designed to help low income students who come to the university. And it had all of the ingredients I needed to create an institute. And so we put it all together. And on the campus, Dr. Adams, who was my teacher, is running that institute, and she's ready to she's ready to retire. But we talked to her, not retiring just yet, help us get the institute off the ground. And she's pulled together the faculty, and that's her advisory group. Now, the law also allowed, it's already been in place since 2003, for the opportunity for these faculty members to also get some cross training and earn some additional funding. And so that cross training would be, rather than teach these kids theory, they'll actually teach them what's actually going on in the business world. And so I'm looking for corporates to send some of their people in, and I send some of these faculty members over to learn more about, and then they come back over and teach these kids. Right next door is Claflin College. Claflin College is called TANA, the Institute of Teaching and Nursing. One of the most difficult areas all across the country we're having. Shortage of teachers and shortage of nursing. Their program is different. They're recruiting on the nursing side, working with the technical schools. You get 2 years. You come to Claflin, you get a Bachelor of Science in nursing. Teaching, they're working with high schools across the state, even in the summer months, going after young people, bringing them in. Perfect opportunity to provide additional funding, giving them the opportunity not just to do things on campus, but also look at high schools in terms of kids, whether they're taking the right STEM classes to be able to be teachers in nursing. Excellent program. Voorhees College is in the rural portion of South Carolina. They're called the Institute of Rural Development, Voorhees Institute of Rural and Community Development. And so all these other issues I'm talking about with the other schools are going to affect the rural counties. And so they have 2 schools right around them that they can put hands on. And there's Allen University in Columbia. They had already started a program, and that program was developing the old Waverly Hospital back when there was a segregated hospitals. Blacks went, or Negroes, or African Americans went to the Waverly Hospital, and it's been closed for years. Well, they're making an institute out of it. It's called the Boeing Institute of Civility. What a tremendous hospital, tremendous history to be able to talk about all those issues and what brought us to that point. And so we've been working with them trying to finish this hospital. They're looking to open and have an opening of their institute in October. The other 3 I mentioned have already opened. And then there's Morris College over in Sumter, kind of hidden back by itself in a small rural county, suburban just a little bit, but it's small. But it has Shaw Air Force Base. It's called NIC, Networked Information, Technology, and Security. And by the way, they decided to name their institute after me, the
Oh,
John L. Scott Institute. And
that's gonna
so
feel pretty good.
it does.
Yeah.
And so they're doing a lot of cybersecurity, and they are recruiting kids from the high school level coming over to that school. We're going to do some work to build them. They've got an old building on campus to do some work to build them an actual institute. They're using some class space. I'm really excited about them, not because of the name. I'm excited about them because of what they do.
Mhm.
There's a lot of other schools like the Citadel and others that are out there doing cybersecurity. And so to be able to create some partnerships between some of the larger schools and Clemson and others to work with the smaller schools and to utilize the human resources we have with these professors. But what I like about all of that, we're able to bring in some of the best talent from across this country to be able to talk to these kids, have a tremendous exchange of information. Some call it a town hall meeting. I call it just plain old classroom instruction and to get firsthand what's going on. Then I went to Rock Hill, one of the last schools to come in, which is Clinton College. They have a wilderness center. And under that wilderness center, they get people back to work who've had all kinds of health and other kinds of issues. They're called WAC, Wellness and Community Health. They're doing a tremendous job up there too. They've got a director on board, but they already got a big institute already built, a
Nice.
fabulous building. They're moving forward. They've got a director on board. They're planning, I think, to have their grand opening just shortly. And I think, then there's Benedict called BEST, Business Entrepreneurship, Science, Technology, BEST. They've not announced yet when they're going to open. I anticipate their institute will probably be in the Swinton Center. It's already built. But collaboration with colleges and universities working together, changing the face of the institutes in terms of when you normally open these pages and you see these schools, you just see old buildings and nothing really new that tires these new young people who are so more adventurous into the modern technology world. Now, some of these things are going to cross-lap with each other, like the School of Civility, to be able to teach corporates about the culture change with young people coming in and the do's and the don'ts and how we train and get people ready to make a difference. The cybersecurity in terms of getting these young people who will be going to corporates early on. What are some of the do's and don'ts you don't do if you got to be certified as a secured person, get clearance?
Mhm.
And for the kid to be able to see it early on, young people put a lot of crazy stuff on Facebook and they think it's a good thing. Well, if you're going to go in that world and you're going to choose that field, you've got to know there's some things that you don't put out there.
Oh,
And if
yes.
you're doing it, you take it down and you hope that nobody goes back and you get caught up in some old stuff that you should have never had out there.
Yeah.
Everything you put out there is not good. And so one of the things I discovered is that the schools did not have the technical assistance to be able to make all these programs work. And that's when we created the Institute of Innovation and Information, led by Dr. Glenna Nelson, who had worked at Voorhees, who I took it from South Carolina State College, who had worked at 2 or 3 other HBCUs, who really understood the climate and understood those missing ingredients that were missing to make these institute work. And she has been a tremendous asset to the team in getting the program off the ground. And it is higher education. And we're part of now the higher education system. Matter of fact, SCIII is what we call it. It has its own board. Dr. Nelson has an advisory board. And there's something else that's missing. And it is, we need a foundation who can help bring in these dollars. I go back to what the president said. He said, listen, he said, we didn't stay in the game with the chip as it relates to computers and cars, and China's gotten far ahead of us. So we're going to spend billions of dollars to get ahead. We're going to build 75 new plants. Well, these young people need to be a part of that process.
Mhm.
What these chips are all about, what we can do to experience what it is. Even if you never built a chip, at least you got the instructions, you saw it. Some folk were able to participate at your institute. You were able to work on the federal side with it. Even corporate said they wanted to invest money. I think the biggest thing that I'm waiting on is these electrical cars and building these electrical stations. Urban's going to take care of themselves. The large Shell gas company, Exxon, they'll take care of themselves. But rural counties, that's going to be a little different issue, especially whether or not the co-ops have a system big enough, a charging system big enough to make that work. Well, these students can help them with that. And as we put broadband, expand broadband in these communities, co-ops control 2 million households. There's only 5.18 million people in South Carolina. They control 2 million. So already there is already that relationship. So the challenge is, what is available for small businesses in those communities? Who can help us get that message across? Creating a partnership with those who will be putting those, who will be expanding the broadband doing the construction, whether it's on the ground or is up on the cable line. But a better opportunity for young people to be involved. There's a number of steps. Of course, people got to be communicated, got to be talked to. And for the first time, these young folk will be able to go into large corporations that have those kinds of departments, and be able to learn a lot of things from it. Those corporates will make that investment to let these young people help them. Church meetings, organizational structure, all kinds of ways to communicate back to the community to make it work. So that's kind of what this project is all about, as we continue to move it forward and continue to make the progress work. The foundation is in place, and we have the major corporations in the state and other partners from across the state that's part of this foundation.
I'm wondering if the current background and more acceptance of the concept of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, has made it easier to get this going, or if there's been pushback.
Well, for many years, I've been advocating to our larger colleges and university diversity. And I've sat on the higher ed subcommittee and also on the screening committee for boards and commission. And that's been a big question and a big issue for me in the state for a number of years. But having had the opportunity now to publicly ask these colleges, I'm seeing some major changes in South Carolina colleges. Still yet not a lot of African Americans or other nationalities sitting on the boards, but I am seeing a change with recruiting in terms of staff, coaches, even presidents, provosts, vice presidents. And so there is greater movement with that, even a more openness with them wanting to work with us, with the HBCUs. It's a lot we can learn about the glass being half filled.
Yeah, exactly.
We got to figure it out. And so we're taking an approach to make sure that as these larger schools move to have that conversation with them, that they're ready. We can have a partnership. I can carry out my part of the partnership. So if we bring a large grant, let's say $50-60 million grant to South Carolina, and that grant is filtered through the foundation, I've got SCIII to help work with the other HBCUs, depending upon what the grant is all about, and making sure a lot of kids get involved. It's easy for me to ask for money for 7,000 kids than to ask for 400 or 2,000.
Yeah.
And so the greater the number, the more impact that project is going to have, and more folks you're going to have involved in that project.
I'm just wondering if the whole concept you've got here would transplant to other parts of the country for other minorities, indigenous peoples, Latinx folks.
It should. I think the key is going to be, will somebody invest long-term in funding to get it off the ground? Mm-hmm. I think long-term, once you get it off the ground, corporates and others who will buy into it. Corporations are all about success. Mm-hmm. Success. Am I getting the bang for my buck?
Yeah.
When I do the promotional parts of it to promote this company. Was that a good investment? Although there were no major financial return, but that was a return because we were involved in the community. And I think as that process moves itself forward, I think you're going to see some corporation with more forward thinking in terms of how we make some of these things work, and how we also create some other partnerships with corporates in many cases that we didn't work well together. But now we can, because we're looking for another type of product or another type of success.
I have the feeling that this model program is going to be widely copied. Are you
Oh yeah.
starting to already get interest in that?
Oh, no question. But we won't let it go. We're gonna promote this thing as much as we can. This month, we're in the HBC Time magazine this month. We've been in the Diverse magazine and a couple of other large publications across the country. So we want to push it. I think what is important is the concept, and the concept of inclusion. And I'm not necessarily just talking about race inclusion, but inclusion of everybody, and how we can make the resources that we have betterly work for our own communities. And everywhere you go, there's some kind of problem: water problem, air quality.
Yeah.
And so when we get these students involved early on to understand these problems, to help us stop some of the pollution and get involved in trying to help with some of the change. Can you imagine having a public hearing that your Department of Health, Environment, and Control are there, and you've got students who come to the hearing and give you some real information about what's going on? Stuff you would have paid millions of dollars for to do research, but these young folk have already done it on their campuses and given you some directions where we need to go to do it.
And as you point out, people who are working locally on local problems are much more motivated to do that.
That's correct.
All right.
That's correct. And most of the local problems here are the same local problems you got there.
Yeah.
Water, air quality, you name it. We got it. Maybe it just at a different level.
Exactly. Climate change, all of that
Oh,
stuff.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a tremendous issue
Mm-hmm.
coming forward, especially in southern states where you've got different kind of and where you are,
Mm-hmm.
manufacturers who are doing a lot of polluting. The question is, how can we continue to draw off each other, and these young folk get this information out there? So we see we're not fighting about it. We're just trying to help each other make the change.
One of the things that's a problem with society today is that we all have these little silos, which we're all information doesn't get shared. And this is what programs like this do: is they break down those silos, bring people together, and the results are fantastic every time that happens.
All right.
Is there anything I have not asked you about you want to make sure that our listeners know about?
Well, I think that's it. I would just say to my listeners, continue to pay attention to what's going on, continue to follow it. There's a tremendous transition in working with colleges and universities, moving them from being just educators to being educators and business people. And if you move the business model to those colleges, we're going to find that these young folk are more equipped to work. And if they had the opportunity to be a part of this corporation for a year and a half, they've already learned the politics on the job. Mm-hmm. They're more likely to know up front whether or not that's a job they want to go to, either stay in that field.
And be more valuable to the company when they do join them.
That's correct. Because the company's made tremendous investment in that young person by having them to come and participate with them.
Bless your heart. I really appreciate what you're doing.
Yes, sir.
You've been very generous with your time. Are there any final remarks you'd like to make before we close this out?
Hey, we look forward to coming out to take a look at some of what's going on. I think you're in Oregon.
Yes.
Yes. We can keep up with the Oregon Ducks and what's going on out there.
Okay. Well, we'd love to have you.
Yeah, and to be able to move across this country, and probably again some lecturing as we move forward to how we can work with some of these other schools to get them on law. But I got to get this one off the ground first. I say to others who've been kind of pushing us, want to know, give us a little bit more time. Once we get it in place, we'll be able to help you.
And we will be looking forward to that a great deal. Our guest today has been South Carolina State Senator John L. Scott, Jr. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Roddy. You've been great.